left dangling from the last section. We're going to actually shift gears here. And my biggest answer to any questions you're likely to raise are, well, I don't know, go read through the Bible and see if you can spot an answer. Because that's really the encouragement. I think once you start to get this promise in the Old Testament down, it gets to be fun to read through the Bible. To say fun. At times it's dull and tedious. And it's all right to skim through the various begats, that kind of thing. And when you get to Leviticus, just read it fast. And I just really don't recommend reading schedules, because that'll have you, for instance, a year of reading through the Bible in a schedule. You'll spend a month in Leviticus. And that's just not what you're meant to do. You read Leviticus in 2 days, 3 days. Just skim through it quickly. There's some wonderful stuff in it. I am holy. I want you to be holy. Without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. There's some rich stuff there, but just don't sit there and try and say, now what does the fat on the kidneys have to do with, whether they're burned on the fire or, just some of those things were for the Old Testament legal system, for the ceremonies of the sacrificial system, and we don't do that anymore. You can just kind of skim through those. And if you're not on a reading schedule, it gives you permission to do that. Just read it like you would a book or a novel. Just grab. And for me, the secret for the Bible reading is spending half an hour every morning. There's not a morning I don't do it. There has not been a day, I don't know, decades, I've not had a morning where I haven't started reading through the Bible. Even when I'm flying overseas, I say, it's coming up on an earlier morning than, since I'm flying into the sun, I'm actually in the middle of the night, but I'm going to, according to the new clock, it's the morning. Let me do my morning reading. And the reason for that is because I treat it as a relational connection. I'm an old bachelor. I don't have any, all of us who are married will have spouses to talk to. And you don't sit down and say, okay, it's my duty to do 10 minutes with my spouse today. Let's get this over with. See, the moment you get this into a relational point of view, you recognize that God offers himself, and if you spend a half an hour with him, it gets the day launched, and he's available to talk to you for the rest of the day. And you can even look at the Bible more than just that half hour. You can actually engage him. But what I do is I find that it takes about 10 minutes to get through the noise. The noise of my Bible reading is where I can't concentrate. I'm thinking about, I've got to call so-and-so, I've got this to do today, I've got this on the project, will I be able to have time? And I just finally sometimes bring a legal pad, just jot down, okay, get this taken care of later. And after 10 minutes, I get into I'm actually paying attention. And the next 20 minutes is the sweetest time in the world. But it's some people who, if you read through the Bible in a year, you only take 10 minutes in the Bible and you're always in the noise. You never get past the noise into the real relational, rich, just sitting there and saying, oh, God, it's good to be with you. So those are some pieces of advice for you. Those are answering questions you didn't ask. So let me go now to the third part, and this is going to be a real shifting of gears, and this is going to be we've never heard this before. Where is this guy coming from? So blame Ken. It's his fault. Or maybe blame Deanna for not telling Ken, you've got to do these things, whatever. But what we're going to do is to actually talk about Jesus in the Old Testament in a tangible way. And this is the surprising feature. So we'll talk about that here. And I'll start with chapter 32 of Genesis. And this is Jacob getting his name changed. Now, Jacob has got a problem because he doesn't do well in relationships. Okay, he gets he has this wife that this gal that he really likes, Rachel. Remember that story? Oh, he is smitten. And his uncle, his whatever relationship he is, says, oh, yeah, I'll tell you what, if you don't have any money, but if you work for me for 7 years, she's yours. That pays the bride price. Oh, that's great. Of course, they have the wedding. In those days, they didn't have great lights, and they probably had a little too much wine. And he finally got to be with his bride in the dark, a little too much wine, and he wakes up in the morning and discovers it's Leah, the less than attractive sister, who's also single. And he goes, what What is this? Oh, I forgot to tell you, Laban says. In our culture, the older has to get married before the younger. So, that's why we slipped Leah in on you. And, she's now your wife. So can you tell the relationship between Jacob and Laban? Now, Jacob has just run from his brother who wants to kill him, Esau, because he's stolen his birthright and his blessing. So he's a scoundrel, and he runs into another scoundrel, his father-in-law. So his father-in-law lets him work for him for another 7 years and then keeps changing his wages to cheat him as much as he can. And finally, Jacob runs for it, and he gets away from his stepdad who wants to kill him, but God meets with him in the night and says, don't touch him. So he doesn't kill him. But he's coming back to meet Esau, who the last time we heard from Esau wanted to kill him. So he just doesn't know where he's going to land, and he just says, but he's the one that gets the promise. He's one of the promise gift, through you the blessing, if you can count the stars, that's how many offspring you're going to have. He's going, okay, God, remember that, the pillar to heaven thing, and he has the dream, and he goes, okay, God, and he refers to that. He says, you're the one that told me to trust you, so here I am. I don't know how it's going to work out. So here's this episode as he's utterly distressed, as he's facing the fact that he's got his brother coming with 400 and some men. And that's not exactly a welcoming party. It's a raiding party. It's out to slaughter the unloved brother. So that's a story you can read and see how that turns out. But in the night, 32:22, in the same night he rose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok River, which is a dividing river between where he's been living and to where he's going. And he took them and sent them across the stream and everything else he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Who is this man that just comes up and says, hey, let's have a wrestling match? No context. It's one of these things when we get to heaven, the Bible tells us all we need to know about all we need to know, not all of what we wish we knew about all we want to know. Okay, so this is one of those, what is this about? And so there's this wrestling match, and they wrestled until the breaking of the day, and when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint. That's just a horrible thought, as he wrestled with him. And then he said, let me go, since the day is broken, for the day is broken. But Jacob says, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Well, he knows something about this guy being able to bless him. And he said, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And then he said, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. A big name change. For you have striven with God and men and have prevailed. You've succeeded in your wrestling. Then Jacob asked, please tell me your name. And he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, which is Hebrew for I saw the face of God. That's what Peniel means. For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. Who was he wrestling with? He thinks he was wrestling with God. And that's why he wanted the blessing. And he was wrestling over the issues of life and death. Jacob, Esau, Jacob, his father-in-law, Laban. And he's wrestling with God over those issues, literally, not figuratively, in a wrestling match. And somehow he knows something, and he wants to know the name of this one he's wrestling with. And he concludes, I wrestled with God. And that's what he's saying. God says, yeah, go ahead and call yourself God wrestler. That's who you are now. Israel, God wrestler. Now, what's weird about this is this statement, I have seen God face to face, and yet I survived. What? Why does he think he shouldn't have survived, even if he somehow wrestled with God? Well, that sets up this tension that comes in the Bible, and we can pick it up in Judges 6:22. Let's go there. And here we have the people of Israel are not being particularly faithful. They're struggling. And the Amalekites, the Midianites have all come in, and they're just stealing crops and suppressing, ravaging the land. And the people are crying out to God. And then it turns out this one guy, Gideon, is among the people trying to hide the wheat that they've harvested from the raiders that are coming by. So we'll pick it up in verse 11. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, and while his son Gideon was beating out the wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, the Lord, and by the way, capital L-O-R-D that you see there, that means Yahweh. That's the word, the personal name of God. I am who I am. I am that I am. The angel of Yahweh appeared to him and said, Yahweh is with you, O man of valor. And Gideon said, please, sir, if Yahweh is with us, then why has all of this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. And the Lord turned to him and said, go in the might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? Could someone comment on that verse? Does anything catch your attention? Who is talking to Gideon? It said at first the angel of the Lord, right? But who does it say in this sentence, this verse? He says, and Yahweh said to him. The title that is given to this angel of the Lord is Yahweh. Now, this raises a theological tension because we know from the book of Hebrews there's this beings that are lower, humans are lower than the angels, and angels are less than God. So angels are this state of this group of beings. But here's another reality in that, the use of the word angel. It just literally is the word for messenger, the communicator. So the communicator of Yahweh comes and is talking with him, and it turns out the communicator of Yahweh is Yahweh himself. That's the literal reading here of what's going on. In the same way that's what impressed Jacob. I wrestled with God himself. I've seen God face to face, and yet I survived. So with that, recognizing that angel may mean a group of people, but typically angelic beings actually have titles for their status, who they are, what they are. Seraphim, cherubim, technical titles for these beings that are messengers for God, workers for God. So to say that an angel is therefore other than God is a little bit like saying, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, means it can't be God because Word seems somehow less than fully God, unless God exists eternally as a communicator. And the Son is the basis for his communication in the same way that messenger represents the word giver, the presenter, the communicator. So I'm just going to leave you with that tension. These are tensions that theologians wrestle with even today. So I'm going to go ahead and take this as the angel of the Lord doesn't preclude that being the Lord himself by the way the text presents it. Okay, so it says, and the Lord says to him, so let's pick it up there. Please, if the Lord is with us, then why has this happened? And the Lord answers and said, well, go in your might and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? So it's here the Lord sending him. And he says, please, Lord, how can I save Israel? For my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my father's house. And Grand Rapids is nothing compared to Minneapolis, St. Paul. I mean, I'm just nothing. And the Lord said to him, but I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. Get on with it. But it's the Lord who said that. Did you catch that? It's not the angel said to him. It's the Lord said to him. So we'll just take that on board. And so he then finishes this episode where he does a sacrifice then. He prepares a young goat, And he puts the meat in a basket, and he puts it on a fire. And the angel of the Lord, verse 20, said to him, take the meat of the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock and pour the broth over them. And so he did. And the angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and the fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes, and the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. Then Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord, and Gideon said, alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, peace be with you, do not fear, you shall not die. See, the presumption is in both of these cases that if you see God, or in this case the angel of God who calls himself Yahweh, you're going to die. You can't see God and live. Should we go for another episode? Let's go to Judges, the story of Samson, birth of Samson, chapter 13. The angel of the Lord, verse 13:3, appeared to the woman and said, behold, you are barren and have not had born children, and you shall conceive and bear a son. Now that caught her attention. She's wanted to have kids, and she hasn't been able to have kids for who knows how long, and this figure comes along and says, oh, by the way, I'm going to make sure you have a child. Oh, really? And so she goes and says to her husband, there's this man of God who came to me, and by his appearance, it was like the appearance of the angel of God. So whatever they think angel of God looks like, she says that's who it was, verse 6. And it passes on the message that she got. And Manoah prays to the Lord and says, could you please bring back that messenger, and I would like to have that conversation with him. And what are we to do with the child that will be born? And God listened to the voice of Manoah. And the angel of the Lord came again, and they sat in the field and had this conversation. Asked what the mission would be, and they get instructions about the mission. And they said, please, verse 15, let us detain you and prepare a young goat for you. And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, if you detain me, I will not eat of the food, but if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord. For Manoah did not know that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, what is your name, that I may, so that when your words come true, we may honor you? And the angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful? And that kind of reminds us of the titles that were given to the Emmanuel back in Isaiah 9, doesn't it? Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, some of those things. And so here's this angel saying, it's wonderful. That's who I am. I'm wonderful. And it seems like an angel would be just a mere angel, an ordinary created being, would be a little less than likely to say, I'm wonderful. I'm just going to propose that.
So you feel that these are Christophanies?
I'm getting there. You're saying, boy, you're sure slow in making a point. And it's fair enough, because what I want to do is build the case here, because we keep seeing the angel of the Lord, but then we see things that don't go with the idea of a mere angel, which is we've got fixated in our heads that an angel is a subordinate being to God, a lesser figure, a being somewhere between God and humans. And I think I want to just throw that out and say I think it really can mean also just the one who communicates, God. And we'll press ahead and make the point more fully later on. Then Manoah knew that it was the angel of the Lord, verse 21, and that is the angel of the Lord goes and ascends in the flame of fire in the altar when the sacrifice is made. He steps into it, goes just like with Gideon. Same thing happens. And what's the conclusion here? Then Manoah knew that it was the angel of the Lord, and Manoah said to his wife, we shall surely die, for we have seen God. There's the punchline. See, it's not we've seen the angel, we've seen God. That's what they take this angel of the Lord to be. We've just seen God. And they believe that they should die. But his wife said, if the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted the burnt offering. So see the logic? So what we're doing is we're just reading this carefully and going, they think they've seen God, and the angel of the Lord they think is God. And they think that when you see God, you're supposed to die. And she says, well, but we'd be dead now if that was his intent.
Could it not be that the reason they think they're going to die is because God tells Moses in Exodus 33?
You're sneaking ahead. Are you looking at my notes? Just back off. Back off. I say, stop it. Stop it right now. You're onto something, though. Okay, so let me press ahead here. You guys are clearly becoming impatient with me. So what I want to do is say that what we have here are realities when God is visible. He's overtly visible. So let's walk through some more of these. In Genesis 18, we had the three angels, and one of them, let's go, I want to spend a little time there. Genesis 18. These three angels, the question of having the promised seed, remember the Hagar experiment didn't work. That was doomed. No, that was not according to the plan. And God says, no, I'm going to bring along, and a year from now you're going to have the child. And sure enough, the child comes. So let's, in chapter 18, let's track that a little bit. We pick it up in verse 1. The Lord appeared to Abram, or now he's called Abraham, by the oaks of Mamre as he sat by the door of his tent in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth. And he said, Lord, and this is not capital L-O-R-D, not Yahweh, but it's just Master. If I found favor in your sight, please come and have a meal with us. And so they come in and they have this conversation. Verse 9, they said to him, where is Sarah, your wife? And she's hiding next door, listening through the tent door. She's in the tent. And the Lord said, notice, one of these 3 angels is now called what? Verse 10, Yahweh. And Yahweh said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Now, and Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. And Abraham's and Sarah were old, advanced in years. He's 98 or 99, and she's way past bearing children. So Sarah laughs and says, "Oh, come on, give me a break." And the Lord said to Abraham, 13, "Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" So we go on, verse 16. Then, as the men set out from there, they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them and went on their way. "Shall I hide," says the Lord, Yahweh, it says, verse 17, "shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him." There's the promise theme. So he's significant. Shall we include him in our decision making? "For I've chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord, Yahweh, by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring Abraham what he promised to him." Then Yahweh said, okay, because of the outcry in Sodom and Gomorrah, I'm going to have to go and confront them. And then Abraham is being drawn into this conversation with the permission of Yahweh. And he said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" And he uses the argument down in verse 25 that if you wipe away both the wicked and the righteous together, how could that be fair? Surely, God, you're just, aren't you? In fact, what does he say? "Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?" And Yahweh said, "Well, if I find 50, I won't do it." He's having conversation with Yahweh. And he calls him, "Will not the judge of all the earth, you, won't you show kind of mercy if you find some of the people there who are righteous?" "No, okay, if I find 50, we won't do it." And then, of course, they whittle it down until finally we get to, how about 10? And verse 33, and the Lord went on his way. No, we're still going to do it. There are not 10 to be found in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? But to catch the point there, this is Yahweh in conversation with Abraham. And he's on 2 legs. He's identified as a man, one of 3 men. And the other 2 are angels, angelic figures, accompanying Yahweh. Now, this rattles our, unless we've already worked our way through Christophanies and Theophanies, and a lot of people haven't, this is just an earth-shattering sort of, this is crazy stuff. What is going on here? And it especially gets to be significant because we get to Exodus chapter 3. Let's go there. And we see that the story gets even more interesting on this question of who is this one Yahweh and the angel of the Lord. Now Moses was keeping the flock with his father Jethro and the priest of Midian, and they're on the west side of the wilderness, and at Horeb, which is Mount Sinai, and the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. Now we talk about the burning bush, and boy, we miss the point. It's the angel of the Lord who is fiery, and he's in the bush, and it makes the bush look like it's on fire, but it's not the bush that's on fire, it's the angel of the Lord. Now, have we ever had an occasion where someone just looks like they're on fire? How about the Mount of Transfiguration? Jesus says, okay, here's who I really am. Oh! Okay, that's all. Just wanted to let you know. Now you can go back and tell the people down below that you've seen the kingdom, me and my kingdom. You've got a little snapshot. That's who I really am. Okay? But he was like fiery white and just, sort of incredible. In the same way in the book of Revelation, you get the portrayal of Jesus as flaming and you cannot even describe this crazy reality of what it is to see Jesus. Okay, so with that in mind, what are we seeing here? Well, you've got this angel of the Lord who is like he's on fire, and yet the bush that he's standing in is not burned. And verse 4, when Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush. It's not angel of the Lord called him. He says God called out of the bush. And he's called Yahweh. And he's the angel of the Lord. All collectively the single being that is there. We don't have three separate beings. We have one being who is God, the angel of the Lord, and Yahweh. And we find that he has this conversation, and he declares who he is when he says, hey, come here and take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. Well, you don't get that sort of thing if it's a mere angel. Remember in Daniel, Daniel wants to worship one of the angels. He's, no, don't you do that. I'm just a created being like you are. Don't make that mistake. So the point that I'm making here is this is something way, way bigger than an angel, as we tend to limit angels to figures like the book of Daniel, who are coming as servants of the Lord. A messenger, of course, of the Lord, so still an angel in terms of being a messenger, but in this case, not the living God who is giving a message. So if we could make that kind of distinction, we find that he goes on and he says, now, who am I? Well, here's who I am. What is my name? God said to Moses, verse 14, I am who I am. That's who I am. Say to the people of Israel, I am has sent you. Well, that's the same one who was in the burning bush. This is the same one who's giving this I am that I am. That's who I am. That's your name for me is always going to be I am that I am. Yahweh is the Hebrew word for to be is Yah. Yeh is one of the forms of it, and you kind of get the sound-alike features there. He's really just playing off of the to be verb. I am that I am. I exist as I'm a being who exists in myself. So there's a fundamental reality there of impressive, tangible personhood that catches us by surprise. And Abraham is a little surprised that he survives this episode. He doesn't expect to, but I say Abraham, Moses. But he then, from that point on, has this comfortable relationship. Later on, it'll say, for he spoke to God face to face. That was characteristic of Moses. In fact, he ends up with his problem, his skin issues, fluorescent face, where he comes into the presence of God and he fluoresces because he's been in the glory of God, and it takes a while for the fluorescent to fade. Okay, so this is a unique relationship that he has here. So we go to Exodus chapter 24, and we see that, remember, we've rehearsed this already a little bit. We've talked about in chapter 20 this morning, have the Ten Commandments after chapter 19 where God says, do you want to be my people and I'll be your God? It's almost like marital language. I'll be to you as your perpetual companion. You'll live with me and I'll live with you and we'll live together. Do you want that? Yeah. Oh, that's a win-win situation. We get to have you protecting us, sheltering us, feeding us, caring for us. Oh, what a deal. Sure, we'll do that. What they didn't get is that he says, and by the way, I want you to follow me in everything that I tell you, which they don't do so well on, okay? But what he does is he says, okay, I'm going to give you the 10 basic commandments, but I'm going to give you a whole bunch of additional stipulations, and that runs all the way through chapter 23 of Exodus. So in chapter 24, let's go there. This is the end of some of the stipulations that he's established, and he says in 24, okay, come up to the mountain, you, Aaron, come up to the Lord is what he says. Come up to Yahweh. You, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, the two sons of Aaron, 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar. Moses alone shall come near to the Lord, to Yahweh, but the others shall not come up to be near him. And the people shall not come up. Anyone else shall stay at the bottom of the mountain. And Moses came up and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the rules, stipulations, and all the people answered with one voice, all the words of Yahweh that he has spoken, we will do. We are his people. We're committing to, okay, we're signing on the contract. And Moses wrote down all the words of Yahweh. And he rose early in the morning and built an altar in the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the people of Israel and offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half the blood and put it on the basins, and half the blood he threw against the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient. Then Moses took the blood and threw it on the people. Behold, the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. Then Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 of the elders went up, and they saw the God of Israel. And there were under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clarity. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men, and the people of Israel. They beheld God and ate and drank. He didn't lay his hands on them. Can you believe that? They survived this. So they saw God and survived. Once again, notice that there's always this statement, somehow we survived when we saw God. They're not expecting that. It seems a rule that if you see God, you're going to die. He'll consume you. It's just too big for you. You're just not ready for it. In fact, back in chapter 19, they had God present himself, and the mountain shook, and lightning and fire and flames, and they're down at the foot of the mountain. And they said, and they heard him speak. They could hear his voice aloud. And they said to Moses, don't ever let that happen again. Could you just be the one who endures that stuff and tell us what he says? That we don't. This is too scary for us. Okay, so that's this thing of engaging with God. It's not. It's a strange reality. So all of that is okay. So they meet with God and they see him. Wow. Let's go to 33. Exodus 33, and I already had someone sneaking ahead and reading ahead, and that's just not fair. You don't read ahead unless you're doing a Bible read-through. Then you can do that. Okay, so here we have a problem that formed in chapter 32. The people, when Moses was gone 40 days, learning how to worship God and how to make this whole thing work out and finding out how to build a tabernacle and all the rest, decided to have a party, and guess what they did? Oh, let's make a graven image of God. What was one of the rules? The 10 Commandments? You shall not make something about that, not making a graven image. And guess what they had experienced back in Egypt? Apis, the bull god. Well, let's make a calf god. Whoa, won't that be fun? Out of gold. It's just sort of a reminder of what God is like. You know, we just need something tangible. We're tangible people. And, you know, God couldn't have been that serious about that command. Who knows what they were thinking? And Aaron says, okay, I feel peer pressure and I'm ready to cave in, so let's just do that. And so they do it. And God is up on the mountain and he says, we better stop things here. Things aren't going so well back in the camp. And Moses comes down off the hillside and discovers the people have been let loose, as he puts it. And God says, I will not travel with these people any longer, because if they claim to be my people and they're going to be like this, I am like a consuming fire. I'll consume them. In fact, what happens to Nadab and Abihu when they give a false form of offering later on? They come and bring this new uncommanded incense offering, and they come into the glory of God, and they're toasted. They both die. They're burned to death by the glory of God. So that's what God is saying. You've got to recognize this. To be in my presence inappropriately is to be consumed. That's why they're afraid of God, because those are reports. If you get around God and you're not ready to be around God, the chances are you're going to go toast, gone, consumed. And so sure enough, God is saying that to Abraham, I'll get my names right, Moses. He's saying, no, if I were to go with these people, I'd consume them. I can't travel with them. And Moses goes, wait a second. You read this on your own. It's all in there. Well, here it is. We're reading 33, verse 3. Go up to the land of milk and honey, but I will not go up among you, lest I consume you on the way, for you are stiff-necked people. Say to the people of Israel, verse 5, you are stiff-necked. If for a single moment I should go up among you, I would consume you. I can't do this. I can't travel with these people. They made a vow. They made a commitment. Chapter 24, they made the commitment, and now they've already violated. They're like a bunch of prostitutes, just immediately going out and doing a trick. I will not live with these people. They're impossible to live with. And Moses then says, no, God, I can't take them out without you. If I travel, if I'm supposed to lead them and you're not going to come, I'm not going anywhere. You've got to come with us. You can read the details on that. And plus that, you said you're going to bring up this people. You've got to show a way for this to work. Now it says in verse 11, thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. So he has this intimate relationship with God, going in face to face, coming back with fluorescent face. Then we find he's negotiating with God. Please show me a way. Show me. And he says, if I found favor, verse 13, in your sight, show me your ways that I may know you in order to find favor in your sight. Consider too that this nation is your people. And he said, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. And he said, if your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not your going with us so that we are distinct, and I and your people from every other people on the face of the earth? You've got to be with us. God, how can we resolve this? The people are clearly sinful, but you're not surprised by that. God, what's the solution here? He's crying out, God, I don't know what to do, but I'm not going to go anywhere. So he's bold. Moses is bold, but he's bold on the basis of what he knows about God. He's not trying to come as an outsider from God. He's had this face-to-face relationship, and he says, God, I know you made the people for a relationship with you. You've got to solve this. How are you going to solve it? And so he says, and is it not your going with us that we are distinct? And so on. And the Lord said to Moses, this very thing I have spoken, I will do, for you have found favor in my sight. So he said, okay, Moses, you're right. I have made the commitment to be with the people. And I've made a commitment to you, and I'm committed to you. All of a sudden, we discovered Moses really has a significant role in this. Go ahead, question?
Well, one about line 20, it said, he said, you cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live.
Well, that's what I was going to read next.
Okay, beat you to it.
There it is. And you see, that's what is the startling moment here. No one can see my face and live. Duh. Moses it just said he meets with him face to face. They went up on the mountain, they saw him face to face. They saw his face. And it says, no one can ever see me face to face. And guess what? The liberals win. They say the Bible is full of contradictions, and that what we really have are a group of conflicted manuscripts that have been stuffed together. One manuscript tradition has it that God can be seen. Another manuscript that tells the stories of God from the early days has a God who cannot be seen. And so now they're being stuffed together in an awkward story that just doesn't make any sense at all. So let's abandon our Christianity and call it a night. We're finished. It's not worth worshiping a God who is so confused and can't communicate any better than that. And that's what you would get if you go to a liberal seminary or you go to a university and do a class on religions. And history of religions and Christianity would pose this passage as a dramatic conflict from which there is no resolution. The God who cannot be seen versus the God who can be seen. Oh yeah, we've got a problem with this. Let's go to John chapter 1. Let's just skip out of this stuff and avoid it. Close with a word of prayer, maybe. I don't know. It's discouraging. Why did you bring this guy in, Ken? Just create nothing but doubts and problems for us. Okay, here it is, chapter 1. I just thought it would be an encouraging text to go to after what we've been reading. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. Who's it talking about? Jesus is right, and it says as much later on in the prologue. It says this one was Jesus. Now, does he say he was godlike, as the JWs put it, or a God? It says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In other words, what we have is God who exists with distinctions. Let's go to verse 18. Oh, we'll pick it up in 16. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. This is speaking of Jesus, who is glory, the one who comes and reveals the glory and truth. Glory is the Son of the only Father, full of grace and truth. And it says, for the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. The only God who is at the Father's side, he has made him known. Oh my goodness. There's the visible God and the invisible God. Who's the invisible God? The Father. Who's the visible God? The Son. Who's present on the mountain back in Exodus? The visible God. And who is Moses negotiating with? The invisible God, who says, yeah, I can never show you my face, even though he's been visiting with the visible God. And you see what we find is coherence all the way through the scripture, and those rascally liberals need to read their Bibles. And what we'll find is passages elsewhere that affirm the same kinds of things. Colossians chapter 1:15, as it talks about who Jesus is. He is the image of the invisible God. Could that be any clearer? Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. That is to say, of all creation, he was present in that creation and that he formed it, but he existed before the creation. Okay? That's in Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together.
Hey, we're not finding it there.
Colossians.
Wrong one, sorry.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that's what we're talking about. Okay, but you catch that? We'll skip over the top of it because we just, he is the image of the invisible God. That's who Jesus is. And it says that the Father is invisible. Well, that's a constant all the way through. No one can ever see God. And what happens is in the confusion of emerging revelation, they say, well, if you see God, you have to die because no one can see God and live. Well, what happens is they don't understand the Trinity, and that's a problem for the church today. Philip says, oh, show us the Father and we'll be satisfied. And Jesus says, have I been with you so long? Do you not get it? When you've seen me, you have seen the Father. I and the Father are one. The Father's in me, I'm in the Father. Settle down. I am the one who reveals the same thing in the book of Hebrews. He's the image of the radiance of God, and he's the God who walks on two legs. The Father never walks on two legs. Who's in the Garden of Eden? The God who walks on two legs. And he is looking for his bridal couple. Take what it says in chapter 2:24. A man shall leave his father and his mother, and the two shall become one flesh. That's in chapter 2 before the fall. Chapter 3, God's walking in the garden with his first Adam and Eve couple. And Paul takes in chapter 5 of Ephesians, he says, that passage 2:24, that's actually speaking of Christ in the church. Oh my goodness. So God is with his bridal couple, and they have gone off with another spirit and have despised him for another. And that's the ongoing battle that we see here in Deuteronomy. We see it also in Judges. We see it in our passage that we've just been looking at in Exodus, the faithless people, the golden calf. And God is looking for a bride. I'm going to pull out for myself people who are holy and blameless that will become the bride of Christ. And the whole story will end with the wedding supper of the Lamb. And the God who walks on two legs will come and be with us. So how many times do we have the God on two legs in the Old Testament? How about the captain of the Lord's army? Is that an angel, or who is that? He says, take off your shoes. You're on holy ground. And was that Joshua 5? I think if we start to get the picture, guess what? Jesus is in the Old Testament. These are called Christophanies. And so when we talk about Jesus in the Old Testament, folks, go read your Bibles. Don't think that you're only going to get to Jesus when you get to Matthew. He is present from front to finish. Isn't that good news? I hope you've had a good time. We've run out of time now, but this is essentially what we wanted to give you. There's so much more I could offer you on this stuff. What I do at Cannon Beach is still scratching the surface, and that takes a whole week. But I just want to encourage you to do your Bible reading and encourage other people. Just have conversations about it. Have cups of coffee and say, something I'm reading here is really striking. And some of these things that you never noticed before, they've always been there. And they're still going to be there, and there's more to it. And see if you can read through the Bible and see how many times you have God on two legs in the Old Testament. And start to enjoy the fact that Jesus is just having a good time. Because remember, he is born in Bethlehem in time and space. But is he bound by time and space? No. He says, Father, I pray that I can see, in John 17, Father, I pray that they may be one even as we're one. I want them to be one. I'm one with them, and I want them to be one with you. And that, our oneness would just be. And they've received your word. They've recognized that the word I gave them was from you, and they are now one because they are people of the word. And I've pulled them out. They're not of the world. They're in the world, but not of the world. They're my people. They're word people. And, Father, I pray that they may see the glory that I had with you from before the creation, the glory you gave me because you loved me. We're invited into a love relationship between the Father and the Son, and the Spirit is the one who is rushing back and forth between the Father and the Son. Go to 1 Corinthians 2. The Spirit of God searches out the depths of God, and that's what he reveals. Well, he wasn't doing that just for the creation. He had to be doing that beforehand. That's the nature of the Father-Son relationship, that the Spirit is the communicator between the Father. Father wants to send a message to you, Son, that you're beloved in this new day. I love my son. Go tell him that I love him too. Okay, so he shuttles off, and I don't know how it works, but the fact is that the Spirit is a communicator between the Father and the Son. And what does the Spirit do in Romans 5:5? Pours the love of God out into our hearts by his Holy Spirit. Amen. And that's what we have, is the communion between the Father and the Son, revealed to us by the Holy Spirit, who anoints us even as he anointed Jesus, to show us that this man on two legs is indeed the Son of God and is to be worshiped. Let me pray.